Hey, what's good, Raider Nation? So obviously the coaching search still underway. Mike Tomlin is available. Should the Raiders pursue him? We're going to get into all of that on today's episode.
Raider Nation, what's happening? Professor Kennedy here. Look, I can't even say that straight, but I can say that the Raiders are still searching for their head coach. And we'll talk about that on the Raider Squad show coming up next.
What up, Raider Nation? The value of the number one overall pick went up in a major way. And the Raiders, well, good thing they have that number one overall pick. We'll talk about it here on the Raider Squad show. Let's get it.
Raider Nation, it's time. This is the Raiders Squad. Everything Las Vegas Raiders every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Death Star in the desert. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Commitment to excellence starts here. The Raiders Squad Show starts now.
Hey, what's up, Raider Nation? Remember, if you like the content and you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. You can also follow us on our social media channels. You'll see in the description below the ways that you can connect with us. Also, we do appreciate you making Locked On Raiders your first listen of the day and then the Squad Show your second listen of the day. And just keep in mind that the Locked On Network is the #1 sports podcasting network. So we do appreciate you and your continued support because you are the reason that we're able to do this show and that the channel grows. So thanks so much. Remember, in that final segment, Q and Link are going to be taking some of your questions and comments. If you're listening to this on the audio side, because you can find us there as well, give us a 5-star, leave a rate and review because Link and Q are on the show. So obviously, why wouldn't you, right? But also, they are going to be taking some of your questions and comments. So keep that in mind. Now, in that third segment, we are going to be getting into whether or not the Raiders should actually make a move for A.J. Brown. I think that's going to stir up a little bit of a debate. Also, Mendoza, his draft stock is up because Dante Moore returning to Oregon. I didn't see that coming. And obviously, we got to get into the latest news of the day. And let's start off with some Raiders news first, because obviously the coaching search is underway. And they have interviewed a couple of coaches so far this week. Ejiro Evero, the Panthers DC. Also, Jesse Minter, Michigan guy. Obviously, a lot of ties with Spy Tech and Tom Brady. He was also interviewed. And I believe today it's Jeff Hafley, the Packers DC. So defensive coordinator week. I don't know what's up with that, but that's what the Raiders are pretty much doing this week. And obviously some other chips have fallen, but just in terms of the names that I've mentioned, and we've talked about it in the past, do any of those kind of make you a little bit curious and want to know a little bit more? And do you think those three prospects we should keep an eye on? We'll go with you first, Link.
Well, I mean, probably Jesse Minter as far as one of the names that you mentioned, maybe because of the Michigan connection. I don't know how much that goes. I mean, we always want to try to tie these things together, whether it's the Patriot way or the Bronco way or whatever it is. But that brings up questions. But here's the thing. I appreciate the Raiders doing their due diligence. After Tomlin stepped down, and there's reports out there that Harbaugh is expected to sign a contract with the Giants, that takes one of the big head coaches off the table. We'll talk about that idea a little bit later. But, as far as these new names, I'm excited about it. What I'm most curious to see is which way they want to go, because for the most part, if they want to go offense, that makes sense, having the #1 overall pick and probably going for Mendoza, which they should do if they use that #1 overall pick. But if they go defense, where does that say for Patrick Graham? Because I've liked Patrick Graham. Now, he hasn't had the players, in my opinion, to really implement his defense. And that was one of the surprises why they let Merritt go last year, because he was turning into a better safety within that system. But with that being said, if they go defensive-minded coach, is that the end for Patrick Graham? And so that's a big question mark. If they go offense, like I said, it makes sense. What do you think, Hugh?
Yeah, no, I like the way that they're casting this net. I really do. I like the fact that they're not fixated on just one candidate or two candidates and locked in there and they're hell bent that's got to be the guy. I like the fact that they've interviewed young guys. I like the fact that they've interviewed guys like Kevin Stefanski that have had experience. I like the fact offense, defense. It's basically like they're really truly doing a head coaching search. But if you look over the last handful of years, it hasn't really been that. It's been very as a matter of fact. And so I could appreciate that. With that being said, I think it makes more sense, as we talked about on the show, that they go with the offensive-minded guy, a younger guy, again, because what Lincoln said about the #1 overall pick and likely having Mendoza as your quarterback. But that doesn't mean that that's the only way they can get it done. Jesse Minter is a hell of a coach. We know that he's going to be a head coach. He's most likely going to get a head coaching job this cycle, right? Whether that's in Baltimore, whether that's in Pittsburgh, whether that's with the Raiders, wherever that. I mean, there's a spot for Jesse Minter as a head coach. So I think that he's a very intriguing guy. Evero, I like him. I like what his defense did, but then at the same time, when I saw that last drive against the Rams when they had to have it in the way that he played that soft zone defense, it really didn't give him a chance, especially against Matt Stafford. I know that they had guys out, so that was kind of a disadvantage, but you figure things out, and when you got to have it. So it wasn't really a great resume builder. Hafley didn't really have a great resume builder either when they gave it 25 points against the Bears in the fourth quarter. So there's a couple of, knocks on these guys, but at the same time, you understand that they're really good coordinators, and Hafley's another guy that I do think is going to end up with a head coaching job this cycle. I'll tell you, the one guy I'm still paying attention to see what's actually going to happen is Matt LaFleur. I know we talked about Mike LaFleur with the Rams, the OC, but again, it was the 12th, which was Monday, that Schefter said that they're working towards a contract. It's more than 48 hours later. They still don't have a contract. I'm just saying it shouldn't be that difficult. So I'm continuing. I've cautioned Raider Nation a few times to continue to keep your eye on that story in Green Bay, because that could shake up everything if he becomes available.
That's really interesting. I want to circle back to Patrick Graham. My biggest fear is that someone else picks him up. He was interviewed by the Washington Commanders, and then they just have the best defense of all time. Like, that's my biggest fear if Patrick Graham leaves, right? Because every time someone leaves the Raiders, they go somewhere else and they end up having tons of success. But the Matt LaFleur piece is very interesting, Q. Link, what are your thoughts on that? Like, if he was available, if he was to come available, because this is like the craziest offseason so far. There's so many coaching opportunities and so many big name coaches. Like, would you be interested in Matt LaFleur?
I would certainly approach the idea logically. I mean, what he could possibly bring to your offense or to your team. I mean, I thought he's done a great job up in Green Bay, and he definitely deserves a contract extension. But they haven't got over the hump, and I don't know if that's players. I don't know what you call. I mean, they go out there and make the investment in Micah Parsons, and until Micah Parsons goes down with an injury, they seem to be on cruise control. I think he's a good, solid program builder, and that's what the Raiders need. I would definitely approach it with logic and see if it's possible.
Yeah, I think it's a like I said, it's a story to pay attention to. It makes the most sense that he stays there in Green Bay, because I think he's had a lot of success. It makes sense that they extend him. He's got 1 year left on his deal, but the fact that they were working on a contract on Monday and we're almost at the end of the week and they still don't have that kind of raises my eyebrow a little bit. With the Patrick Graham thing, I think he's done as well as he could given the situation. I'll be honest. There was a couple seasons ago when Josh McDaniels was still the head coach. Remember they moved Patrick Graham to the booth? I thought that was a death nail. I thought he was done. Hey, you start moving the coordinator around, he's out of there. And all he did is have a defense that was good enough to keep these teams in the games. Now, did they come back and win all those games? No, but you saw what Patrick Graham could do. I don't think we saw anything that was even slightly looking like his defense last year. I think it was kind of grab some guys, put it together, throw it against the wall, and hope it sticks. I mean, it just never felt right. And even talking to players in the locker room, I remember asking Eric Stokes and multiple other guys, how is this defense coming together? And he said it's still a work in progress. And that was like week 15, week 16, right? It's still a work in progress, trying to figure out Pete's philosophies along with Patrick Graham and trying to blend them together. So I don't think he really had a shot. He also had an interview with the Miami Dolphins for their head coaching job. I'm not saying that he's going to get that, but the fact that he has had multiple interviews, he had interviews last year as well, kind of lets you know that, there's some respect around the league for him and what he's able to do. Again, I don't know if he's going to end up with a job, a DC or a head coaching job. And I don't know if he's long for the Raiders, because whoever comes in could easily, move on from all the assistants that are there. I mean, that's just kind of how these coaching searches go. So it's kind of a wait and see type thing.
And ultimately, that's my biggest issue with these coaching changes over the years, because when you have the administration changes as well as coaching changes, you end up letting things fall through the cracks. We let go on the defensive side, from Spillane, Nate Hobbs to Merrick. We let go 3 good players that were coming under Patrick Graham's defense, learning it and blossoming and thriving. And then all of a sudden you're back to the reset button. Here we go again. So much on what Spytech had mentioned, we got to stop letting go good players when you develop them. That also remains some stability or some steadiness in the stability, I should say, in the coaching staff. Because if you bring in a new defensive-minded coach, he might want to change up things, and all of a sudden the pieces that we have currently on the roster don't fit, and you're out there spending more money on places that you don't necessarily need to look at right now.
Yeah, and before we get into all the other latest news, really quickly, shout out to our sponsors. Today's episode sponsored by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, some other chips have fallen. You mentioned John Harbaugh. It looks like he's going to be signing a 5-year deal with the Giants. Those details still coming through, but Adam Schefter did tweet that. So he's one of the big names now that, he's chosen a team. And it's the Giants, no surprise, because I feel like some people thought there were some really good pieces there, still some good pieces on defense, and they have their quarterback. Now, Mike Tomlin and the Steelers decided to part ways. This is a guy that's never had a losing record. Of course, we know his playoff struggles as of late, the last, I guess since 2017, I guess you could say. But Mike Tomlin is a huge name that's out there. Now, Q, do you think that Mike Tomlin could be a good fit for the Raiders, and should the Raiders pursue him?
I think Mike Tomlin could be a good fit for any team, to be honest. I mean, Mike Tomlin's a hell of a coach. You don't go 19 seasons and never have a losing record if you're not a hell of a coach. And look what they've been working with at the quarterback position ever since Big Ben retired. And even the last couple of years of Big Ben, he wasn't really that guy, right? So I give Mike Tomlin, Coach Tomlin, so much credit. I think he's a hell of a program builder. I think he's a hell of a motivator. And I think he's done a great job. With that being said, one, I don't believe he's coaching in 2026. It's been hinted at. He's kind of let it be known that he's not going to coach this year. The other thing about that is he's still under contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if any team, not the Raiders, just any team decided that they wanted to hire him, it would be a John Gruden type trade situation, Sean Payton type trade situation. And I don't think that that's good recipe for the Raiders. I don't think that they are in the business of being able to give up draft capital for a coach, not in any slight disrespectful way, because I do think that Mike T is a hell of a coach, but the Raiders need all the draft capital they can get. The Raiders need to be able to build that roster. They need, they need guys on offense, defense. We know what it is. Go up and down the roster. You can tell they don't need to be using draft capital on a coach. I think the best way for the Raiders to handle this approach is go find a young guy, offense-minded, defensive-minded, whoever you feel comfortable with. Let them build their program. Let them go and hire their coaches, whether that's keeping some of the guys that are currently there or having a complete clean slate. Let them give them the canvas and let them go to work, right? Let them go to work with how they want to build this thing. There's some nice pieces with the Raiders. Obviously, we know Bowers, Genty, right? Miller's there, Max Crosby, obviously. I mean, there's some really good pieces that are there to work with. So let that coach, be their next Mike Tomlin. And, the one thing about the Steelers that I give them so much credit for, I mean, look, I just turned 49 in November, right? They've had 3 head coaches in my lifetime, right? In my lifetime, they've had 3 head coaches, and they took a chance on a young Mike Tomlin at 35 years old, 1 year a defensive coordinator in Minnesota before they decided to give him that head coaching job. And 19 seasons later, it worked out pretty well for him, right? They got a Super Bowl, multiple trips to the playoffs, and again, never a losing season. I feel like the Raiders could do that. They could find a guy. They could take a chance on a guy maybe a little bit early, but you have signs and you see that, I can believe in this guy. I believe he can get it done, and let him go to work and have that guy that could be there consistently for a long time. I'm not saying it's going to be 19 seasons because that's kind of unheard of, but still could have that guy there for quite a while.
First of all, I like Mike Tomlin. I'm just going to preface it and say, and I've always liked Mike Tomlin, and I liked the program that he had in Pittsburgh. Secondly, the only issue that I have with hiring a seasoned head coach like a Harbaugh or a Tomlin is they're going to want to come in and have personnel decisions like Gruden did, especially their second time around. They've established that with their rapport in their previous clubs, and they're going to want to have that control. So where does that already throw up the hierarchy that's been in question for me over the last couple of years with Spytek and his involvement and of course Brady and all that other stuff. So and third and last point to your question, Shantelle, it's not the right time for the Raiders to look at a Tomlin. It really isn't. And now that Harbaugh's gone, I like these guys and I like what they've done, but it's not the right time because giving those thoughts, about hiring the head coaches and having some personnel decisions, that creates to me inner conflict in an organization that has yet to be stable. And I know that's what we're looking at, but that's why I'd much rather have them go younger and on the outside looking in and as far as their head coach search goes.
Yeah, agreed.
You're muted, Chantelle.
Sometimes I got to be muted to let you guys talk. You know what I mean? But I do think But I do think that consensus is that a lot of Raider Nation wants them to go younger. And that's why names like Davis Webb is really intriguing. That's why a name like Kubiak is very intriguing. And I think that is maybe the direction that the Raiders will go. And the Raiders can't hire a coach that's in the playoffs.
Right.
So that's another thing too. So they're waiting for a lot of things like to finish. A lot of the chips haven't fallen yet, but this is really interesting. Mike Tomlin, I also believe, is going to be taking a year off. I don't think he has to rush back into anything. But Raider Nation, keep it locked here, because on the other side, we're going to be talking about why Mendoza's draft stock just went way up. And remember, in that final segment, in that fourth segment, Link and Q are going to be taking some of your questions and comments. So keep it locked here on the Locked On Network. You're watching or listening to the Raider Squad Show. Quo, like status quo. New year, new systems. This is a time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communication is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. And that's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to reconnect with customers. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. It's no surprise that Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free. Plus, get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnfl. That's QUO.com/lockedonnfl. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right. And we also still got to hear from another one of our sponsors as well. And we'll quickly go over to one of our new sponsors, actually. It's Ultimate QB. Hey, guys, the draft pick positions are set, and so many teams are looking for their franchise quarterback. Ever wish to become a pro, getting drafted first overall by the Raiders? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game called just for you called Ultimate Quarterback Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a #1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness, to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the #1 quarterback career mode on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. Sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry and evolve your teammates, give your input to your GM on roster moves, play the actual games in 2D, and rise to the ranks to become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a quarterback career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play, has no ads, and works 100% offline, perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. Just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we've got something special just for you guys. When you use the promo code Locked On, that's all in caps, it's one word, in the game store, to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB, football legend, QB1, it's your legacy. All right, welcome back, Raider Nation. And remember, if you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. You can also follow us on our social media channels. You'll see in the description below the ways that you can connect with us. And, one of the biggest news that came out yesterday was when Dante Moore got on SportsCenter and announced that he would be returning to Oregon. This is something I didn't expect, because I think it's good for him personally to return back to Oregon, but it wasn't something I expected, because now it really is a one quarterback draft. When you hear that, Q, what are your thoughts on Dante Moore returning, and what does that do for Mendoza's draft stock?
Well, thank goodness the Raiders have the #1 overall pick, first and foremost, right? But I saw that that the announcement was going to be made at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, so I pulled out the iPad. I'm at the radio station. I've got SportsCenter pulled up. I'm like, okay, I'm getting the tweet already ready that Dante Moore has just declared for the NFL draft. Like, I'm already set to go. I'm ready. Like, I'm Schefter. I'm on the grind, right? I'm thinking that I'm about to make this tweet, and then he starts talking about prepared and preparation and being prepared. I'm thinking, is he going to? And he said he's going back to Oregon. Well, what, and I know it had been rumored. I know it had talked about. I agree with you 100%. I think it's great for him. You just don't see that often. And that's what NIL has changed, right? NIL has allowed these guys to be able to make a decision like that. Lincoln will tell you back in the day, right, when you weren't legally able to get paid, and I say legally able to get paid because we all know how the game went, man, these guys it wouldn't even have been a question if he was going, right? I mean, because he's got a chance to be the number 2 overall pick. Look, the number 2 overall pick, Jaden Daniels, going back in 2024, his contract was $36 million fully guaranteed, $24 million signing bonus. You think that a young man would have passed that up if there was no NIL? No way, not a chance. But now they have that opportunity. We saw in the Peach Bowl why Dante Moore needed to go back. It's not that he's a bad quarterback. He is good. He's got a really good skill set, but he does need some fine-tuning. And why not fine-tune in college? Lincoln says it all the time. I don't want to develop a guy in the league. I want a guy to come in and be ready to play. So he's giving himself that opportunity. So good for him, first and foremost, but also great for the Raiders have the number 1 overall pick, man, because you said it. It is now a 1 quarterback draft. You've got Fernando Mendoza, and that's it. Ty Simpson, good quarterback. Not a guy that I'm going to put my franchise and think that he's going to be the savior. Trinidad Chambliss, I was talking about him on day 2 as possibly a guy that, could be a fallback guy. Now, all of a sudden, he's a first-round pick, right? Now, all of a sudden, everyone just moves up in the pecking order. And I'll tell you, man, this is literally not a great draft for quarterbacks. Fernando Mendoza is easily the number 1 QB, and I'm so glad that the Raiders had that number 1 overall pick. It gives them options. I'm 99.9% sure they're going to pick Fernando Mendoza when it comes up in April, but it does give them wiggle room. It does give them options that they can make, and, of course, there's going to be a lot of teams, I think the team right behind them, the Jets, that are at least going to be calling and seeing what it would take to get that number 1 pick. Not saying that they're going to trade it. I want to be perfectly clear. I'm not saying that or even suggesting it, but the phone calls will come, and I know Spytek will answer the phone.
First of all, it's good that Dante Moore is going back to college. He needs more experience. He needs more plays. And I think he'll be a good quarterback next year. He's a good quarterback now, but I think his stock will rise next year when he starts to figure out the game just a little bit more. He's a young man, very impressionable. He's got a bright future in front of him, without a doubt.
Only 20 years old.
That's exactly right. And secondly, to Q's point, yes, I'm glad the Raiders have the first 1 pick, the overall pick, because they do have some options. Not to say they're going to trade it away, much like you said, but they do have some options there. There are some teams that reek of desperation. But here's also the thing to look at. You look at a team like the Giants, who fell a little bit farther back, they've already got their quarterback. So they wouldn't be in play for a quarterback anyway. So, when you talk about the teams that are really looking for a quarterback, maybe you put New Orleans up there, maybe you put Cleveland in that box along with the Jets. The Raiders have some options. Fernando Mendoza, in my opinion, after watching this film, watching that bowl game and seeing him catching up where all you guys are on him, I believe he is the best quarterback that's in college football, and the AL eligible come out. What I'm also seeing more and more times these days is that kids are trying to stay in college as much as they can. Trinidad just got rejected by the NCAA to get another year, but kids are trying to stay in college because they know they can collect that money. Yep. So I say that to say this. When you come on the National Football League level, in my opinion, you got to be ready to go. And I think Fernando Mendoza is ready to go. I think he's a perfect fit for the Raiders. I think it would be a great way to, as Q, and we talked about in previous shows, a great opportunity to bring fans back in, but he's going to have to be a part of a good system. They've got some good pieces. They'll address free agency and with the offensive line. I mean, you address offensive line with free agency, and I think they're going to overspend with that. We'll talk about A.J. Brown in a moment. I think they've got some good pieces, but I'm glad to see Fernando Mendoza is a solid pick. And like we said before, keep it simple, stupid. Kiss method.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, just to keep it simple. Pick the guy and let's go.
Yeah, and I think Mel Kiper at one point had Dante Moore as number 1, and after the Peach Bowl, Mendoza's there at number 1. I was kind of surprised at Ty Simpson coming out, but I think, he'd maybe go higher than he would in next year's draft. But it's kind of weird because this year was supposed to be the quarterback draft, but it's going to be next year. But in terms of what people, yes, allegedly, exactly. You never know until like years
right.
after. But in terms of Mendoza's draft stock, and we're talking about this right now, there might be teams that are really, really desperate because this is a 1 quarterback draft. I think Ty Simpson should have returned, right? But he's entering the NFL draft. And for a guy like Mendoza, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, but I think we just have to, where would you kind of think, you know what, I might take that deal? Would it be more than 4 first rounders? Because for Trey Lance, they gave 3.
Right.
So for a guy like Mendoza, when there's only really 1 quarterback that's plug and play, that's what they're saying. These analysts are saying, would you consider that? Because, the Raiders do need a lot of pieces, Q.
Well, look, this is the deal. The rule is you can only trade 3 years out of first round picks. So the Jets, for example, could give up 4 first round picks. They have 2 first rounders this year. They have a first rounder next year and a first rounder the year after that. So they could, in theory, give up 4 first-round picks. Personally, I don't think that they'd be willing to do that. I don't think that that's a good recipe for success for that organization. But, I mean, you have to consider it. You would be foolish not to consider it. And I know that the Raiders, aren't guaranteed to be in this position to be able to, get a quarterback, get their franchise quarterback like they are right now. But this is why I would pick up the phone and I would listen to the offer, because they may make an offer like that. Again, I don't think they will, but you never know what someone might offer out of desperation. We know how that goes. And the only way that I make that trade is if I look around at my scouts, I look around at my head coach that I just hired and say, what are our true feelings about Fernando Mendoza? How do we feel about him? Are we in love with him, or do we just think he's a good quarterback? Do we really believe that he is a franchise difference-making quarterback? And if the answer is no, then why not flip it, right? I think the answer is yes. Again, want to be perfectly clear. Again, there's so many wires that get crossed. So I want to make sure I'm perfectly clear. I think he is the difference maker. I think they would be foolish to pass up on him, but it's about what they want, what they see, what that vision in that building is. And again, we won't know who's even going to put the vision in place until we know who the head coach is. So yeah, again, you pick up the phone, you listen. I tell people that with jobs all the time, right? And in the industry that I'm in, Lincoln knows how it is. You can get a call from anywhere. I can get a call from Bristol, Connecticut. Hey, Q, we want you to move. I'll listen to the sales pitch. Doesn't mean that I've got to take the job. You know what I mean? Like, I'll listen to it, see what they're offering. I'll take a couple seconds to think about it and say thanks and no thanks. I like where I'm at, right? And that's exactly what John Spytek and company, that's what their responsibility is to do. Again, you don't have to act on it, but you do need to listen.
Desperation will often wreak expense or
Yep.
be expensive. Okay, so I will say this. In the Jets situation, they know that they gave up a lot of good players to get where they are, that draft capital, and they reek of desperation in order to bring a proven winner. But I also go back to your comment too, Shantelle. How did that Trey Lance scenario work out? Didn't. You see
It
what I'm
only
saying?
worked. It only worked because they got Brock Purdy.
Well, I mean, but again, Mr. Irrelevant, you're not planning on having Mr.
No,
Irrelevant.
that's what I'm saying.
You know what I mean? You're not expecting the last guy to get drafted to be to turn out to be a star. You're not
right.
You can't possibly expect that.
They would have been fired.
Exactly. So the fact is that you go. It's a crapshoot. The draft is a crapshoot. But when you overthink things and complicate things, you just make yourself seem stupid. It's not that hard. Keep it simple. The fact is, you need a quarterback, and he is the best quarterback. Sure, I'll take the spam blocker off my phone so I can accept phone calls from everyone and anyone. And then more times than not, no, I'm not interested.
Right
now, please take me off your list. I'm not interested. But you only honor that to a certain degree. Much to Q's point, and I agree with it. This is why you hire a staff. This is why you hire a coaching staff and a drafting room and a scouting staff. Is this my guy? Is this a guy that we can rely on? Should we go with him? This is a valuable pick. Let's use it. Yeah, but just keep it simple. Don't overthink things and don't make them complicated.
I think for the most part, a lot of Raider Nation is sold on Mendoza. I had some questions. I saw the Peach Bowl. Those questions were a wrap for me. I was like, this is the guy. And the thing that I love about him the most is I think he has killer instinct. When the game's on the line, he knows how to win games. And that's what I like about him. In terms of being a generational quarterback, we won't actually know that until he's able to get on the field. And Link always says that. So there are questions. And I think as the draft comes up, there's going to be analysts that find holes in his game, and that's going to happen. So it's going to be interesting how the chips fall. My question to you is, if the Raiders don't end up trading the pick, and I don't think they will, because that would be ridiculous at this point. They need a quarterback. In terms of building an offensive line, because he's going to need one. I mean, we saw what happened to Cam Ward this past season. Not the best O-line. Obviously, they took him number 1 overall, the Titans. How aggressive should the Raiders be in free agency when it comes to that O-line? Because we saw what the Bears did, and the Bears just beat the Packers. They saw instant success. So, Q, how important is it for that to be one of the first places that the Raiders actually try to add to on their team, because they might draft Fernando Mendoza?
I mean, even if they don't draft Fernando Mendoza, it should be non-negotiable. They need to attack that offensive line. That should be their number 1 priority, right? They do like we do. We like to go through all the free agents that are available. They need to be doing that. Matter of fact, a while ago, they knew how much salary cap space they have. They know where their deficiencies are, right? That needs to be a priority, regardless of who you have behind center, because you have a guy named Ashton Genty who you want to be able to get the most out of him. He's up here running for 1,000 yards, behind the line of scrimmage, right? Because he doesn't have any blocking. So yeah, that has to be a priority regardless. Now, to your point, when he was at Cal, he took a lot of sacks, right? There was a season he took 41 sacks there at Cal. The last year he was there because the offensive line wasn't in place. Indiana, Kurt Cignetti said, we know what to do. We're going to go out there and we're going to get the best offensive lineman. We're going to put together an offensive line around him. And they did. And those sacks were cut in half this past year, right? And obviously his play went up. And obviously Kurt Cignetti is a hell of a coach. But yeah, there's got to be a plan in place. You can't just, draft Fernando Mendoza and be like, all right, the Savior's here, go to work. No. It's a team game. You've got to make sure that you have everything built up in the right way. You can ruin a young quarterback immediately if you don't put them in the proper position, if you don't give them a chance to succeed. So they need to do all the heavy lifting throughout the course of this offseason. We'll see the progress, right? Again, the draft is not till April, right? I've been trying to let everyone know that there's steps to this, and free agency is going to come up well before the draft will come up, and they'll have an opportunity to go out there and address that offensive line and put those pieces in play, at least start to put those pieces in play to give Fernando Mendoza, whatever quarterback, and the rest of the team an opportunity to have success offensively.
You already know what I'm going to say. It's absolutely essential. They should be spending right now. They should be looking and addressing the issue right now, and see who's on the wire, who's going to be available, and who they could possibly make a play for in free agency, having the money to spend. They should be doing their homework right now, because I assume they're going to draft a quarterback, but they definitely need to address that offensive line, and it'll be through free agency as well as the draft. Here's the thing. You look at Caleb Williams with Chicago a couple of years ago, number 1 overall pick, took a disaster, had a disastrous offensive line his rookie year, struggled, even though he had good numbers, struggled to win. Now all of a sudden they address the offensive line. Next year they're in the playoffs, and they just beat Green Bay, and they're hosting another playoff game. Same thing will be said about Cam Ward and Tennessee Titans. I know Tennessee's going to go out there and address their offensive line too. They're going to try to get it right for their future. They have their doubts about Cam Ward, and you hear those skeptics out there who are sitting there saying, well, maybe Cam Ward wasn't the truth, wasn't it? Well, it's hard to develop a person, or how to not necessarily develop a person. It's hard to keep a person upright and playing when he's down there or running for his life. So they have to address their offensive line. Teams that have done that have come back and do it. I think the Raiders have a unique opportunity this year with having the number 1 overall draft choice. You have your future quarterback there in Mendoza, and you have the money to spend in all offensive line and in free agency. They're going to overspend. They are going to overspend. I'm going to tell you that right now. They're going to overspend. They're going to see some names that come down the list and be like, huh? Who? But they need it. They have to do it, and they have to address that offensive line, because all these powers that they have, Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, all of them ain't trash in nothing if you're not going to have an offensive line.
And they're going to have a lot of competition as well. Make no mistake about it.
That's why they're going to overspend. Right,
exactly. There's plenty of teams that have a lot of salary cap space, right? And you can look around the league and tell the teams that need offensive line. The thing about it is, I say it all the time when it comes to quarterback. I say it all the time when it comes to offensive linemen, supply and demand, right? There's a lot of demand and there's not a lot of supply. So there's going to be a lot of overpaying, to Lincoln's point, for some guys that are blue chip type, free agents coming up. In my opinion, like Lindenbaum from Baltimore, that center. I believe that should be target number 1. There's going to have competition for that guy, but I would just throw the bank at him. Right when free agency opened up, the Brinks truck was sitting in front of his house. Gone, whatever in there you want, man. Like they always say, you get 10 minutes to grab whatever you want. Hey, man, we'll give you about 45 minutes. Grab whatever you want and let us know what you left for us. Like, you know what I mean? Like, go get that dude. And now you have a bona fide center that you feel great about. Then you can dedicate JPJ to that guard spot if that's where you feel great for him. You have Miller coming back. You have what you believe is somebody in Caleb Rogers, would like to see some more. Charles Grant, you feel like you have something, but you'd like to see some more, right? I mean, you've got a DJ Glaze. He could be part of that rotation, the competition. Now, all of a sudden, you're looking at the offensive line room. You're like, you know what? This is pretty good. You go out there and spend some money and get a couple guys in free agency and some of the young guys and then guys that you feel confident about that are still with the team. And now all of a sudden that offensive line room looks a lot different.
Yeah, and I always feel like they never spend the amount of money that they should. Like last year, I was like, why didn't they spend all the money that they had? Because they could have gone and fixed the O-line.
But I think that was part of their plan. Because they're going to get a couple compensatory picks this year as well, because they allowed guys to leave the building, get paid free agency money, and they didn't hardly spend anything. I feel like that they had a good idea that, okay, this is going to be, even though Pete Carroll said it's going to be a 10-win season, this is going to be one of those wait and see type things. We're going to fill a couple holes here and there, with a couple veterans, and we're not going to be, very ambitious when it comes to spending money. I feel like that they kind of knew that they were going to have a lot of salary cap space this year, and that's when they were going to go all in.
Yeah, and we'll kind of see what the needs are for the Raiders and talk about it. On the other side, we're also going to see if Q and Link think the Raiders should make a move for A.J. Brown. That's coming up on the other side. Keep it locked here on the Locked On Network. You're watching or listening to the Raiders Squad Show. As the new year gets going, and a lot of people are trying to simplify the routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door. With easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great, they're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule, 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or just quick lunches. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive the free dessert. Welcome back, Raider Nation. If you like the content, you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening to this on the audio side, we do appreciate you. The Locked On Network is the #1 sports podcasting network, and we just want to say thanks so much for always continuing to support the channel and the show, whether you make Locked On Raiders your first listen of the day and then the Squad Show your second listen of the day. We do appreciate you. In that final segment, Q and Link, we're going to be taking some of your questions and comments. If you're listening to this, you can always hit us up later on, drop some comments on our YouTube page, and we may be able to get to it on another episode. So this conversation that we're about to have in this debate, Link thought about it, texted us in the group chat, and I thought, you know what, we have to talk about this. A.J. Brown, lots of trade talks about where he might end up if the Eagles are going to trade him. Now, Link, do you think the Raiders should make a move for A.J. Brown because they do need a star wide receiver?
Why not? I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if you look at who's probably available out there wide receiver wise, I could honestly see a player getting a fresh start like A.J. Brown. And I believe in it because it happened to me. So I believe in players getting a fresh start. I don't know what the amount it would take. Right now, the Raiders have a lot of draft capital. They have a lot of cash to spend. It might make sense to explore the option. For me, I'm just trying to figure out where was the disconnect between him and Sirianni. I know receivers are divas. I played with every receiver I played with was a diva. So they want the ball all the time. Even when they're triple covered, they want the ball. I get it. But I'm trying to avoid the last disaster that we had with Antonio Brown. You know what I mean? And you don't want to go down that route. But of course, AB was actually kind of cuckoo. Anyways, with that being said, why not explore it? It makes sense to me. Q, can you give some insight on what was the disconnect in Philadelphia between him and Sirianni?
I think, well, for one, the Eagles are the most comfortable, uncomfortable team in the league. Okay. Right? I've been calling them that for a while. They're that couple and we all know them. They're that couple that we know have no business being together, but they're going to stay together, and they're going to go out with you on a Friday night, and you know there's going to be some ish because they always cause some ish, and at some point he's going to fight with her. They're going to have an argument, and I hate him. I never want to see him again, and then Saturday they'll be lovey-dovey again. That's the Philadelphia Eagles. They're that couple. Everyone's like, oh, man, that's so-and-so. I know them, right? That's who they are. A.J. Brown is a hell of a wide receiver. I think that he would be a great addition to any team. I don't think he's a fit for the Raiders, and this is why. Not because he's a diva, not because he wants the ball all the time, but because he doesn't fit the mold of the type of guys that I see John Spytek wanting in the organization. If you go back and remember the way that Tampa Bay brought in guys into the building, and you remember the words of Jason Light, not Q Meyer's words, but Jason Light, their GM's words. He said when they were going through the draft process, they would put all their top players on the board, right? They put their big board together, and then they would take all the D-bags off. Just saying. Again, his words, not mine. So guys like that have those kind of disruptive attitudes or maybe a little bit, edgy, that's not who they are. That's not what they want. They want the dudes that are good guys. And I'm not saying that that's the right method to have. You can have a couple edgy guys. They even said that if they had known who Devin White was, they wouldn't have drafted him number 5 overall if they had known the kind of like attitude and energy that he brings. And I think that he's kind of evolved because all I saw was great energy in the locker room for Devin White this year. But it's just when you hear from the GM of another team, and he's currently the GM, and he's like, this was our method. This is what we did. This is how we put together our big board. I look at the Raiders locker room right now, and I look at all the guys that John Spytek brought in. I don't see any guys that you would consider one of those dudes, right? One of those type edgy, he might not get along with everyone. You might see him arguing and fighting on the sideline. They don't have that kind of persona. Now, you can see an argument here and there because of competition, but not that, that disinterested, that diva style where I'm reading a book on the sideline. You know what I mean? Like that distraction type guy. You don't see those dudes in the locker room. The thing I could say about everybody that was drafted by the Raiders and being in that locker room all the time like I am, they have a locker room full of good dudes. Again, does that mean that they're going to win? No. Is that the right approach? I don't know, but that's their approach. So that's why I don't think that A.J. Brown would be a fit with the Raiders. I don't think that that's what they're looking for in that locker room. But I like Elijah Surratt. I do like Surratt from Indiana. And if you're going to go get Mendoza, I'd definitely go get his number 1 wide receiver. I'm just throwing it out there.
And that seems to be the theme. In all honesty, guys, they're going to go younger. It seems to be the thing. And the prove-it contracts that they have with the older veterans, I didn't have a problem with it. Devin White ended up having a tremendous season this past year. If they're going to go younger, I can see it fitting. But I want to explore all options because, as we said, the Raiders aren't just one player away from being competitive. There are a lot of players away, and they need a receiver. And if they want to go younger and stay with their guys, then play him. That's all I'm saying. If you want to draft a guy like Dante Thornton Jr., play him. Get his ass out there on the football field. So let him learn through his and take his stripes the way every other competitor should do. But don't just have him sitting on the bench stewing over what you don't have. Play these guys. Draft these guys. Play these guys.
I like the comment. I just saw the comment from at Darth Jader, and I'm not saying he's a number 1 wide receiver, but I should have kept Kobe Myers. Yeah, that's a good dude. It's a hard worker, hell of a player. Could have gave him the contract that the Jacksonville Jaguars gave him. Just saying, I'm going to cut for my guy, and that was the dude. Again, not saying he's a number 1 wide receiver, but he sure would have been a part of the solution as opposed to the problem. Yeah,
and Link mentioned it. You always hear the stories about receivers being divas. I feel like AJ Brown would be so similar to Antonio Brown. Less crazy, really? AJ Brown, right? It would be very similar.
Pass in the playoffs. He should have caught that pass in the playoff.
Facts.
100%.
I mean, I do know that. And so that's a hit on him. But, I thought he was a solid receiver. And everybody made such a story about him, what his time in Philadelphia. I was curious to know why the fall off happened.
Yeah, and I think it's just like the disrespect to, like, you see it on television, right? Yeah. I don't think the Raiders need somebody acting a fool on the sidelines. And he was cutting up way too much in Philly. And here's the thing. There's other names, though. There's other free agents that are available. I'm just going to throw a few names out there. And if either of you have any names that you're thinking this is a free agent that the Raiders should go after. So I'm going to name a few. Mike Evans, Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings. These are all UFAs, by the way. George Pickens, Zay Jones, a familiar name, Hunter Renfrow. I don't know. Is there any free agents in terms of the wide receivers that are available that you would go after?
I like Mike Evans. He's, obviously he's an older dude. I like him. He's Mr. Consistent. He's one of the most underrated wide receivers in the league. I just don't think that at this stage of the game for his career, he's often injured now. You see that the Raiders need to invest that kind of money in that guy at this stage of the game. I mean, but he's been a dude since Texas A&M. I got to give him a ton of credit. I don't see it. The other guys, no, thank you. Hunter Renfrow. I mean, obviously he was cool for what he was with the Raiders, but it's not that day and time. Zay Jones, same thing. Right? I mean, just no. There's not really anybody that excites me on that list that you just gave me.
And again, going back to the theme, I think the Raiders are pursuing is go younger and build a program. It makes no sense to go after some of those, actually most of the names that you mentioned on the free agents mark, because one, they're going to want a lot of money to come, and two, they're going to want the ball a lot of times, and they only have one ball. So the leader in the pass room has to be, considered Brock Bowers, and then you work your way down accordingly. But I just don't see going after a veteran status receiver that reeks of desperation. I don't see them doing that.
And like Deebo Samuels, he's not Deebo. He's not that guy anymore, right? Once Deebo got knocked out, nobody was scared of Deebo, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how I look at it. Like he's not that guy that he was when he was peak San Francisco 49ers. Like, the 49ers couldn't wait to get him out of town, right? And he did okay in Washington. But no, I'm good. Juwan Jennings is a headache. I'm good. No, thank you. I mean, he just is. There's something to be said about, guys that when multiple players around the league look at him as like that dude is not a good dude, right? When multiple players that are playing against him are like, I don't like that guy. There's a reason for that. There's something different about him. I don't know what it is. I'm not around him, but there's something different around him. I don't think he's that issue that they want in the locker room either.
Great in the red zone, though. I'll say that about Jennings.
Sure.
George Pickens was a name. You guys wouldn't even be cool with a guy like George Pickens.
I've heard too many stories coming out of Dallas about him after his days in Pittsburgh. No, stay away.
Look, hell of a wide receiver. He showed what he could do, right? But like Mike Tomlin, the ultimate deodorant, the guy who kept us all in the dark about how wild AB was, how wild Le'Veon Bell was, what was going on in that Steelers locker room. Couldn't wait to get him out of town, right? Couldn't wait. And look, he thrived in Dallas. I think he should stay there in Dallas. Let them give him a big contract. If this dude, I always say this, if a guy has issues and he's broke, and I say broke, he's not broke, but I mean, and he hasn't got the bag yet, what is he going to be like once he gets the bag? Because he's going to get the bag. Somebody's going to pay him a lot of money. And if he's got issues and he's disruptive and those stories that Lincoln's hearing, he hasn't even got paid yet. What do you think he's going to be like once he gets paid?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the Raiders do need a veteran wide receiver, though. But I don't know if I'm feeling any of those names. Obviously, there is some talent that's available, but it'll be interesting to also see what they do in the draft or if they continue to try to develop the guys, because I don't really think like a guy like Jack Besh or Thornton even really developed the way that we thought they would this year.
Yeah.
I have
no idea who they are right now. We don't know.
There are, I mean, look, here it goes down to this. There are guys, I believe, that need fresh starts. There are guys that are put in situations where it just wasn't conducive to their skill set and where they should be on the second level. But you also have to do your homework about it. I mean, when the NFL prepares to draft guys, they send out all their scouts and all their extensions to look at a guy's background, look at his home life, look at everything about him if they're going to invest big money in him. I know they did that. They did that for first rounders because they did that to me. And the same thing goes for when you're going to have a top pick. You go and try to evaluate everything. You go back to his high school coach. Let me talk to him. They've got certain entities where they spread out. So they do their due diligence. But with all that being said, it's really a crapshoot when you draft a guy because you never know how he's going to play in your system on this level. And there are times where you get into a disadvantageous system and it was like, you know what? I can't be here. It happened to me. I got a fresh start with the Raiders and I was able to bring my career back. It's happened to other guys along the way. I do believe in guys getting second chances, but it's also up to your scouting department to do its research and don't just go out there and get the big name because he's a big name. You go out there and do your research and you try to find out what you can about this guy and don't take a chance if you think it's going to ruin the chemistry of your locker room. That's why I say that the Raiders seem to be going young. I don't have a problem with you going younger. I don't have a problem with you using draft choices on players. All I'm saying is that if you have draft choices on players, play them.
Yep. Facts.
That's all I'm saying.
I agree with you 100%. And I'm not against anybody getting a second chance. I just, I can tell what they always say, you can't, Tigers don't change their stripes. There's certain dudes that I don't think just make a lot of sense for a locker room. And also you have to remember, and this is something that Mike Mayock used to say all the time when he was the GM of the Raiders, that everyone's not good for Vegas. Everyone's not good for this location, right? So you have to also weigh in the player, how he fits in with the team, and how he fits in the community, right? And everyone is not, and it's okay. Everyone's not built for that. That's fine, right? But you have to weigh all these different options because it is a different animal being here in Vegas. Trust and believe that.
No, 100%. If I was a football player and I was making millions of dollars, Vegas would be a mess for me because you guys know how I like to gamble. Now, there are some positions, though, that the Raiders should be keeping an eye on. It's just facts. But are there any positions that you're pinpointing where you're like, okay, the Raiders have to look for a defensive end. The Raiders have to look for a wide receiver. When it comes to this draft, what are the positional needs that the Raiders need the most? We'll go with you first, Lick.
Offensive line. They need help at safety or corner or both. I do think they need to expand the linebacker room depending on what they do with free agency. And I would not be opposed to going with a defensive tackle as well, somewhere in that draft class as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I don't think that they can go wrong. They need help everywhere. I mean, honestly, and I'm not trying to have, make a cop out answer. I'm just keeping it real. They need offensive linemen. They need wide receivers, right? They need defensive linemen. Somebody needs to be a true Robin to Max's Batman, right? They've been looking for that guy for years. They haven't found that guy. Linebacking room, right? They have a lot of guys that were on 1-year deals. I'll throw one name out there for you. And I'm going to just tell you to keep him on your radar. You don't have to like him. I'm not saying that the Raiders are going to draft him, but keep him on your radar. He's a natural-born leader. His name is Torian York. He's a middle linebacker for Texas A&M. 3 years there, 3-year starter. In high school, he was a starter on the varsity team as a freshman. Like, just an absolute natural-born leader. He's going through the draft process. Had him on my radio show yesterday. He'll be at the Combine in Indy. You just watch for that name. Just remember where you heard it first. Right? Remember I said – Torian York's going to be a hell of a linebacker. I don't know if he's going to be a Raider or who he's going to be. He's going to be a hell of a player. I'm just going to throw it out there.
All right. On the other side, Q and Link are going to be taking some of your questions.
Nothing on this. Like nothing. I'm not even backing Q up. I don't know nothing about what he's talking about. I'm good.
We're giving you Q knows ball. We're giving you your period, bro. You said nothing. Jeez, come on now. We're giving you your platform.
What I'll do is I'll cut that clip and we'll put it in the vault. You know what I'm saying? That's what we're gonna do. And when it comes to fruition, we're gonna bring it up and we're gonna play it on the show and be like, "Q knows ball."
And if it doesn't come to fruition, forget it.
It never happened. You never said it. And that's what happens though in the draft, right? You think some guys are gonna be absolutely great. Right. And they don't pan out, or you don't really think much of someone, and then they end up being an absolute superstar. Like Max is one of those dudes that came later in the draft and turned out to be an absolute beast. So you never know with the draft, but we'll keep that one in the vault just in case, and we'll get to play that clip. But coming up on the other side, if you got questions and comments for Q and Link, please drop them in the chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this, you can always drop them in our YouTube comments later on, or hit us up on Twitter, and we may be able to get to it on the next episode. So keep it locked here on the Locked On Network. You're watching or listening to the Raider Squad Show. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If I need to hire someone for this show, I go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need, real experience, not just a resume. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. Using Indeed sponsored jobs, listeners of the show get a $75 sponsored job credit to give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL, one word, right now, and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. All right, welcome back, Raider Nation. Remember, if you like the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Also, remember to follow us on our social media channels. All right, now it's the final segment, and it's time to definitely get into questions and comments with Q and Link. So, we had some really good ones from the last episode, but some great ones here as well. Let's go over to Mr. Northern Cali. Why is nobody talking about Miami? They need a quarterback as well.
Get in line.
No, I know. But what I don't understand the question. Why are we not talking about Miami needing a quarterback?
I guess because we're talking about the Jets a little bit more.
For a trade up, maybe?
Yeah. Like how aggressive they might be.
Okay, I got you. All right, my bad. Hey, slow processing here. My fault. I hadn't really thought about Miami only because I know Tua's there. I agree that they need a quarterback, but I'd like to see who their head coach is going to be to determine what they can do with it. But I mean, that's a good point. They're going to have to eat some dead cap money. So I don't know how that's going to play into the factor. I don't know if they're going to explore the quarterback situation this year. It would make sense if they were to go after Mendoza. I mean, the more that I think about it, I mean, the guy's from Miami, right? That might be one of those kind of cool tie-ins. He might enjoy that. But, like I said, like Mr. Northern Cali said, I really hadn't thought about that. So that's a good point. That could be a possibility.
And to me, I just said, get in line. So there's a few teams that need a quarterback. We can't talk about everybody all the time. This is a Raider-centric show. So get in line.
It's true. Get in line. That made me laugh a little bit when you said it. Oh, that was quite the accent that you did, or that voice that you just did there. That was brand new. Let's get over to Ivan Davis, 5737, good friend of the show, said, question, are the Raiders stuck at number one based on limited quarterback prospects? Either of you can take this.
Yes. But it's a good position to be in.
Right.
I mean, if the Raiders had a losing season and they were like 4th and 5th, pick in the first round, and they needed a quarterback, I'm not saying that you can only get your quarterback of the future in the first round. I thought Derek Carr, when he came out, was a great value pick, falling in the second round. And look how the career that he had, especially with the Raiders. So you don't necessarily have to go first pick in the draft. But because the Raiders need so many players, and because the Raiders are in such a position of envy for a lot of other teams, it's a great place to be, especially when you have a number one overall prospect like Fernando Mendoza.
Can you understand and realize what the conversation would be like if the Raiders had the awful season that they did and they ended up with the 3rd overall pick? No. I mean, seriously, because 4 teams all ended up with the same record, right? 3-14. The Raiders just happened to get the number one spot, right? Because of the math equation. But could you imagine if they got the number 3 overall pick and this is really a 1 QB draft? You imagine that conversation? It's automatically trade back, right? You're automatically trading back. I mean, you can go and get, if possible, and there might not even be a trade partner, right? Because again, that quarterback that everyone needs is not there. Man, this is so. It couldn't have felt better for the Raiders that they end up with the number 1 overall pick, because again, they're in such an opportune position where they can choose their own path. It's like those kids books that we used to have. Like, you choose your own story, you choose your path that you go. They can do that. If they were in the number 2 spot, number 3 spot, that wouldn't be the case, right? They'd be dependent on others, and that is a bad situation to be in. So the Raiders really, I mean, it's not very often that we say, man, the Raiders lucked out, but the Raiders really lucked out in this situation to end up with that number 1 overall pick.
And the fact that Dante Moore is returning to Oregon, because there's only really one quarterback to pick. So nobody can say that they picked the wrong quarterback or they made the mistake, because he is the guy. This is actually an interesting one at JM Tour. What about Alec Pierce when it comes to a wide receiver that might be available?
I like him. He's like a good dude. He's solid, right? He can be, he could be a leader, one of the leaders in the clubhouse. He could be one of those guys that helps bring the young guys along. I agree with you, what you said earlier, that they need a veteran wide receiver. I just don't know exactly who it is that they're going to go get. When it comes to free agency, I really like guys that are, in the 27, 28, where they still have some good tread on their tires. They're still guys that can be very productive, not guys that are just looking for like a last paycheck. You know what I mean? Like those are the guys that I try to avoid. So, I think a Pierce would be, right there along the line. I think he could be a good addition for the Raiders if that's the direction they wanted to go.
I don't mind it. I think he's a good, solid receiver. But again, it goes against the sort of the principle that seems to be established in the locker room. They're trying to go younger. They don't want necessarily established with a more veteran presence. So it can make sense, but it just depends on the cost.
Right.
All right, let's go to the best for last. It's also a $10 donation. So shout out to Ryan McAndrew, who says, hey, good morning. Who do you honestly feel will be the head coach, and when will they announce it? So either of you can take this. Who do you think the Raiders are going to hire as their head coach?
He said good morning, Q. So go ahead, Q.
Well, the first thing is, I think that whoever they're going to hire is still coaching. I think that they're still their team is still in the postseason. So that would be a Kubiak. I think they're going to go with the young offensive line. So I'm looking at a Kubiak. I'm looking at a Davis Webb. I'm looking at a LaFleur, a Mike LaFleur, and even a Nate Schillhouse. I'm looking at those 4 guys right there. I think that if they go LaFleur, they could easily go with the combo of LaFleur and Schillhouse. I mentioned this on the podcast the other day. I think they can have LaFleur as the head coach, Schillhouse as the OC. If it's Kubiak, I could see them going hot and heavy after him. I think he'd do some really good things with Fernando Mendoza as well. He's done good things with every quarterback that he's been working with, including Derek Carr, including Sam Darnold. So I think that there's a lot to like about him. But and Davis Webb is kind of the guy that's not really known that much, but he's got a lot of respect around the league, and he seems to be one of these young up-and-coming minds that people are starting to show some respect to, and he's had multiple interviews now for the head coaching position. So I know it's not an exact answer that he was looking for, but I do believe it's one of those young offensive minds that are still coaching in the playoffs.
I agree. I agree with you. I think that one of these coaches that are still in the playoffs, and I think they want to see what the Broncos do this weekend coming in the playoff game, especially coaching-wise and everything else to help with their evaluation. but good. I'm glad that they're in the ways they're taking their time. They're not just rushing to the first coach that they see that they might like. They are truly evaluating talent. And I do believe there are other talents to evaluate and have the interview, but they're still coaching.
Yeah, I'm going to take a look at the odds and see who the Raiders might hire.
Of course.
But if I was going to do that, I would place my money on Kubiak. And I think Davis Webb should be the OC and give him the chance as the OC. Like, that's what I would like for the Raiders, but we'll see. And I'll let you guys know what the odds are on the next episode. We'll be back on Monday, 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. Remember, if you like the show, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll be back, Raider Nation, with some more content after the weekend. So enjoy your weekend, and hopefully we hear some more news on that coaching situation. Enjoy the weekend, Raider Nation.